In a world where every transaction is tracked on a digital ledger and currency is mined from pure computation, we find ourselves asking an almost paradoxical question. Does this new technology set us free, or bind us in unseen ways? The pioneers of blockchain promised a revolution: decentralized power, autonomy from banks and governments, a world where we could truly be our own masters. It sounds like the ultimate fulfillment of a philosophical dream. Over a century ago, the German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche spoke of a fundamental force driving all life: a will to power. Today, in the age of Bitcoin and Ethereum, we might wonder, is the rise of blockchain the will to power made digital, letting individuals seize control? Or have we simply traded old chains for new ones, forging a fresh set of hierarchies out of code and cryptography? This journey will take us from Nietzsche's 19th century ideas to the cutting edge of crypto economies. We'll explore the promise of decentralization, a promise of empowerment and self-determination, but we'll also shine a light on the paradox at its heart: the subtle, perhaps inescapable ways that power can reassert itself, even in systems designed to eliminate it. To guide us, we'll invoke not just Nietzsche, but also thinkers like Michel Foucault, who studied how power hides and shifts shape, and Vitalik Buterin, who helped create Ethereum with the dream of a fairer network. We'll hear from critics like Nick Cernacek, who caution that our digital freedom might be more hype than reality. By the end, we'll return to the question: in the blockchain era, are we truly empowered or simply entangled in new chains? The answer, as we'll see, isn't simple. It requires a deep, honest look at technology, philosophy, and the human quest for power and freedom. Nietzsche's will to power, from philosophy to digital freedom. Let's begin with Friedrich Nietzsche and his idea of the will to power. What did Nietzsche mean by this striking phrase? In Nietzsche's vision, life is not passive or neutral. It is a ceaseless striving, a reaching outward, an urge to express one's strength and create one's own values. He saw the world as a stage for the will to power, a fundamental drive that fuels life itself. This isn't simply power in the crude sense of domination. It's deeper. It's about asserting existence, pushing beyond limits, and shaping reality according to one's will. Nietzsche celebrated the idea of the individual who could overcome constraints and define meaning on their own terms. He called this figure the Übermensch, or overman, someone who rises above herd mentality and embraces their creative power to set new values. Now, imagine Nietzsche looking at our modern digital world. What would he see? Perhaps he'd be fascinated by the way millions of people are now challenging traditional authorities, not in politics or art this time, but in the realm of money and technology. Think about it. For centuries, central banks and governments have issued currency and controlled finance. We were largely bound by their rules, a kind of financial status quo. But then came Bitcoin, introduced in 2009 as a peer-to-peer digital currency, with no central bank in charge. Instead of trusting kings, ministers, or Wall Street, Bitcoin asked us to trust math, cryptography, and our own collective agreement on what has value. In Nietzschean terms, this was radical, almost a revaluation of values in the financial sphere, breaking free from the decree that only governments create money. Nietzsche might see in this a form of the will to power, people using ingenuity to take power back into their own hands. One could say, borrowing the words of a modern commentator, that Bitcoin became the will to power manifest in digital form. It's a bold claim, but consider what early crypto enthusiasts wanted: a monetary system beyond the state, beyond banks, a system anyone can participate in as an equal, governed only by the consensus of its users and the laws of mathematics. It's as if the creators of blockchain technology were saying, let's transcend the old ways, let's overcome the need to trust centralized authorities and build something new from scratch. This calls to mind Nietzsche's Übermensch, who creates new values after breaking away from convention. In the financial realm, Bitcoin's rise was indeed a kind of philosophical rebellion against the old order. But the will to power is not only about rebellion, it's about creation. And here too, blockchain technology offers a creative force. With blockchain networks, Communities around the world began to invent new forms of economic organization, from cryptocurrencies to smart contracts and decentralized applications. New projects appear with manifestos about empowering users, banking the unbanked, and democratizing finance. The energy is palpable. Many involved in crypto feel they are part of building a fairer system, almost a utopian endeavor. In Nietzsche's spirit of self-determination, they seek to live authentically and without subjugation, exercising control over their wealth without relying on centralized institutions. This is the dream: autonomy, the individual empowered by technology. However, before we declare blockchain the ultimate Nietzschean hero, we need to look closer. Nietzsche's will to power has a darker side too. It's not a comfortable, simple optimism. It challenges us. Are you ready to handle the consequences of true freedom? In the crypto world, taking power back also means taking on new risks and responsibilities. Nietzsche admired those willing to face difficulties for the sake of self-overcoming. Likewise, adopting cryptocurrencies requires a person to take control of their keys, their security, their decisions in a way we never had to under paternalistic banks. Losing a password can mean losing your life savings, a stark illustration of freedom's price. Nietzsche might have appreciated the boldness of this new world. But he would ask, does everyone using these systems embody a will to power? Or are some simply carried by the tide? This brings us to a critical point of reflection. Are blockchain and crypto truly making each of us an Ubermensch in the financial realm? Or is something else going on beneath the surface? To answer that, we need to examine both the promises and the paradoxes of blockchain power. Let's turn to the promises first, the vision articulated by those who are building and advocating for this technology. The promise of blockchain: decentralization and empowerment. In the story of blockchain, decentralization is the shining star, the big promise that supporters believe will put power back into the hands of ordinary people. So, what is decentralization, and why is it so empowering? In simple terms, decentralization means no single entity is in control. Instead of one bank, one company, or one government calling the shots, the power is spread across many participants. With blockchain networks like Bitcoin or Ethereum, thousands of computers, nodes, around the world collectively maintain the ledger of transactions. No single person can step in and alter the records for their own benefit. The rules of the system are enforced by consensus of the network. This was unheard of in finance. It's like a town meeting where everyone has to agree on the accounting books, instead of trusting the one accountant in town. The effect is a system that is politically decentralized. Theoretically, no king or CEO can come and seize your assets or freeze your account, because there is no central off switch. This vision has been articulated powerfully by Vitalik Buterin, the co-founder of Ethereum and one of the leading voices in the crypto movement. Vitalik and others often emphasize that blockchain is about more than speculative trading. At its heart, it's about freedom and protecting the little guy. Crypto is not just about trading tokens, Vitalik has said. It's part of a broader ethos of protecting freedom and privacy and keeping power in the hands of the little guy. In other words, the whole point is to remove the need to trust big intermediaries, whether they are banks, corporations like Uber or Facebook, or even governments, and instead trust the system, which means trusting open source code and a transparent protocol. Vitalik gives a vivid example. In the gig economy today, if you hail a taxi via a ride-sharing app, a big company takes a cut and sets the rules. But in a decentralized future, blockchain puts Uber out of a job and lets the taxi drivers work with the customer directly, he explains. Drivers and riders could connect on a blockchain-based platform that no corporation owns, where reputation is secured by cryptography and payments flow directly. It's a vision of cutting out the middleman in countless scenarios: finance, art, social media, you name it. So that people transacting or interacting do so peer-to-peer, as equals. This sounds remarkably empowering, and indeed, we've already seen glimpses of it. Artists are using NFTs, non-fungible tokens, on blockchains to sell their work directly to fans without traditional gatekeepers. People in countries with unstable currencies have turned to Bitcoin or stablecoins to protect their savings from inflation or to transfer money abroad when banks wouldn't let them. Communities are experimenting with DAOs, decentralized autonomous organizations, which are like internet-native co-ops where members vote on decisions and control funds collectively, rather than a CEO deciding everything. Each of these is an example of how blockchain technology can flatten hierarchies and give individuals a direct say and stake. The underlying ethos is often one of self-sovereignty. You own your data, your money, your decisions, secured by private keys that only you hold. In theory, no authority can arbitrarily take that away, because the network as a whole would reject invalid actions. It's a new kind of power to the people, built into the architecture of the network. There's also a strong ideal of transparency. Public blockchains, by design, make all transactions visible to everyone, albeit pseudonymously. Enthusiasts argue this radical transparency keeps the system honest. Radical traceability, as some call it. Imagine charities where every donation is tracked, so you see it reach the intended recipient. Or supply chains, where you can verify every step a product took from factory to store. By logging every step on chain, blockchains could shine light on processes previously murky. Proponents believe this can combat corruption and build trust in a way traditional systems, with their closed databases, cannot. All of these promises tie back to the idea of empowerment. They suggest a world where your will matters. You as an individual can participate in global finance or governance without needing permission from a powerful gatekeeper. It's no surprise that early adopters often used quasi-spiritual language, talking about being liberated from banks, or envisioning blockchain as a tool to liberate humanity from old structures. This is Nietzsche's will to power in a modern guise. The drive of countless individuals to assert their economic freedom and reshape the system to better serve them. The creative force Nietzsche spoke of seems to echo in the innovation of blockchain. People creating new currencies, new communities, new ways of organizing collective action, essentially willing new realities into existence in cyberspace. Yet, before we get carried away, we must ask, does decentralization truly eliminate power imbalances? Or does it simply redistribute and transform them? Every rose has its thorns, and even as we celebrate the rose of decentralization, the thorns of unintended consequences and new forms of control may be quietly growing. The very features that empower can also introduce new risks. For instance, transparency is wonderful for accountability. But if all your transactions are visible, do you lose financial privacy? And could that be used against you? Being your own bank is liberating, but if you make a mistake, there's no recourse, no insurance. And if you don't have the knowledge or resources to participate effectively, are you truly empowered, or are you now at the mercy of those who do? To examine these questions, it helps to bring in another perspective, that of Michel Foucault, a philosopher who studied how power operates in society in subtle ways. Foucault might urge us to look beyond the surface of decentralization and ask, what new power dynamics are emerging here? And are we, perhaps unwittingly, enmeshed in new chains even as we try to cast off the old ones? Let's delve into that. Michel Foucault's insight: power in a decentralized network. The French philosopher Michel Foucault spent much of his life studying power, not just who holds it, but how it flows and manifests in society. Foucault had a famous dictum: power is everywhere. By this he meant that power isn't only wielded by great leaders or institutions, it permeates everyday relationships and systems. According to Foucault, power is diffused and embodied in things like discourse, knowledge, and what he calls regimes of truth, the frameworks by which we decide what's true and false. In a Foucauldian lens, even a decentralized blockchain network would be rife with power relations, just of a different kind than the old centralized model. Let's unpack that in simpler terms. In a traditional bank, power is obvious. The bank can freeze your account or deny you service. A very direct, top-down power. In a blockchain, no single node can do that to you, which is good. But Foucault might ask, what new structures of influence and control emerge when no one is in charge? One answer lies in protocols and code. The rules of a blockchain are set by its protocol, the software, and consensus rules that everyone agrees to. Those rules don't descend from the heavens. Human developers write and update them. Usually, a small group of core developers has a lot of influence on a major blockchain project. They don't rule in a monarchic sense. If others disagree strongly, the community can split the network, as happened in Bitcoin and Ethereum's histories. But practically speaking, most users aren't versed in the code and simply adopt whatever version becomes standard. Here is a subtler power dynamic: expert power. The developers and cryptographers, those who know how the system truly works, have significant influence over how it evolves. In Foucault's terms, knowledge is power. The average user might be at the mercy of that knowledge gap. If there's a bug or an update, you're essentially trusting those experts, much like you trusted bankers. Except now, it's an open-source collective of experts rather than a CEO. Power hasn't vanished. It's shifted into a new form, from institutional authority to technical expertise. Another area Foucault would direct us to is the formation of new norms and self-regulation. He introduced the concept of the panopticon, a design for prisons where inmates never know if they're being watched, so they effectively police themselves. In many ways, a blockchain is a transparent system. All transactions are visible to everyone. This can function like a digital panopticon. If every payment I make, every action I take on-chain, is recorded forever and observable, I might start to self-censor or behave differently knowing I'm effectively in a glass house. Yes, my identity might be just a pseudonymous address, but sophisticated analysis can often de-anonymize patterns. The transparency meant to empower the community can also become a tool for surveillance, by governments tracking illicit finance, by companies profiling consumer behavior, even by our peers. We've created a system where nothing is forgotten on the ledger, which is a new kind of power, the power of the immutable record. In the old financial world, a bank might forget or forgive a small transgression. In the blockchain world, code is law, and memory is permanent. This impersonality can feel liberating, no biased human judgment, but it's also unforgiving, a kind of cold, mechanized authority. Foucault also talked about how power can be productive, not just repressive. Power produces norms. It encourages certain behaviors while discouraging others. Look at crypto communities. There is often a strong ideology that shapes behavior. HODL, hold on for dear life. The idea of never selling your coins became a norm in Bitcoin culture, exerting a form of peer pressure or collective discipline. In decentralized governance like those DAOs we mentioned, theoretically everyone has a vote. But often, whales, people with large token holdings, have more influence because their vote is weighted by their stake. A small group can quietly coordinate to sway decisions. Social media channels like forums and chat groups become battlegrounds of discourse, where narratives, what is the truth about a project's value or a protocol change, are fought over. This is power through discourse, something Foucault highlighted. Whoever controls the narrative or definitions of what is good for the network holds power over the community's direction. In a sense, a regime of truth forms around each blockchain, a set of beliefs and accepted practices like decentralization is always good, code is law, etc., that guide the community. Those who challenge these can find themselves ostracized or ignored, which is a kind of power enforcement through social means. Then there's the question of who benefits in practice. Decentralization in theory distributes power, but do some actors accumulate outsized influence anyway? Foucault would note that power tends to crystallize in any system. For blockchains, obvious points of centralization include mining for proof of work, systems like Bitcoin, or stake for proof of stake systems. If 5 mining pools control more than half of Bitcoin's hash power, which has happened, effectively, a handful of people running those pools could collude to cause mischief, like censor transactions or attempt a double-spend attack. They usually don't, because of economic incentives. But the point is the capacity for concentrated power exists even in a decentralized network. Likewise, in proof of stake, those with the most tokens validate the most blocks. The rich help secure the system, and earn more rewards, potentially getting richer. Over time, unless carefully managed, this could lead to new oligarchies. A scenario where a few large players, big token holders, or consortiums, hold disproportionate sway over the network's decisions and development. In fact, observers have noted exactly this. The concentration of mining power, in POBU, or capital, in POS, in the hands of a few large players, could be seen as analogous to the concentration of wealth and power in the hands of a small group under capitalism. In other words, despite all our hopes, the old dynamics of inequality might be replicating themselves in a new digital form. The terminology changes. It's not lords and peasants. It's early adopters and latecomers. Not feudal fiefdoms but mining pools. Yet the pattern of concentration remains distressingly familiar. It's here we feel the full weight of the question. Autonomy or new chains? Michel Foucault would likely say, both. Power never truly disappears. It only shifts and reconfigures. Remove the visible chains of banks and governments, and power may reappear in the invisible circuits of algorithms and network effects. This isn't to say the blockchain revolution is doomed or meaningless, rather, that we must stay vigilant. Foucault believed that by understanding how power works, we gain the ability to resist and reshape it. In the context of blockchain, this means acknowledging issues like who writes the code, who has the most stake, who sets the narrative, and then consciously working to mitigate those new concentrations. Some communities are indeed aware of this. We see efforts to make mining more decentralized, to cap voting power of whales in governance, to build privacy layers on blockchains so users can regain some anonymity. These can be seen as a form of resistance to the emergence of new chains of control, very much in line with Foucault's idea that where there is power, there is resistance. Before we move on, let's distill this down. Decentralization is not a magic spell that vanquishes power. It's a new playing field on which power struggles occur in novel ways. We've removed some gatekeepers, yes, but we've introduced new complexities. Power through code, power through knowledge, power through wealth concentration in networks. Understanding this is crucial if we want to truly harness the liberating potential of blockchain without falling into its potential traps. Next, let's hear from those who have looked at blockchain with a critical but hopeful eye, tech thinkers like Nick Cernicek, to see what they envisage for this technology in the context of our broader economic future. New digital hierarchies, voices of critique, Nick Cernicek and others. No exploration of blockchain's promise and peril would be complete without addressing the hype that has surrounded it. Over the past decade, we've seen wild enthusiasm, sometimes over-enthusiasm, about what this tech can do. Our question of empowerment versus new chains also lives in this tension between idealistic expectations and messy reality. Nick Cernicek, a contemporary author and scholar known for analyzing digital economies, he wrote a book called Platform Capitalism, has offered a nuanced view. He acknowledges that blockchain presents new possibilities, perhaps even radically new ways to own and govern platforms. But he warns that most of these possibilities are still just that, possibilities, not realities. At the moment, these exist more in the hype of their backers than in any practical model, Cernicek said in an interview. In other words, the idea that blockchain will automatically decentralize Twitter or replace Uber, as Vitalik suggested, is, for now, largely theoretical. We haven't yet seen a decentralized social network or ride-sharing service at scale that truly rivals the centralized incumbents. The will to power is there, the desire for alternatives, but fully realizing it has proven difficult. Cernicek isn't a naysayer. He's more of a realist. He points out concrete challenges: technical scalability, usability, and even ecological impact. For example, Bitcoin's early design, which relies on intensive computation, proof of work, brought an unintended consequence: massive energy consumption. This means an ideal of empowerment is colliding with the reality of physics and climate. The technical limitations of something like Bitcoin for rapid, everyday transactions are significant, he notes. And there's also the ecological impact. These factors limit how widespread crypto can become, at least in its first-generation form. If a network can't handle thousands of transactions per second, it can't yet replace Visa or the global banking system. If it consumes as much electricity as a country, it raises ethical issues and invites regulatory pushback. So, while the goal is to empower people, these kinds of hurdles can inadvertently empower a new elite. For instance, only those who can afford huge mining rigs and cheap electricity could profit from early Bitcoin mining, leading to concentration of wealth in fewer hands. Moreover, Cernicek points out that much of blockchain's transformative potential remains conceptual. There's undoubtedly some significant transformative potential from blockchain, he says. But as far as I can see, virtually all of it is conceptual at the moment, and little has been proven a success in actual practice. That's a sober reminder. It doesn't mean blockchain can't transform society, but it means we shouldn't take it on faith. Real empowerment will require real-world proof. Successful projects that show ordinary people gaining more agency or economic benefit, beyond niche tech circles. It also likely requires institutional support and smart regulation to integrate these technologies in a way that benefits the many, not just early adopters or tech-savvy individuals. It's interesting to juxtapose Cernicek's caution with his other writings, especially in collaboration with Alex Williams. In their book, Inventing the Future, they advocate for a post-capitalist vision and even discuss technologies like blockchain as part of a toolkit for a more democratic and equitable economy. They argue that emancipatory possibilities in society, think reducing inequality, liberating people from meaningless work, could be reclaimed if we actively shape technology towards those ends. So, Cernicek is not anti-technology at all. He's concerned with who benefits from technology. He and Williams suggest that instead of abandoning these innovations to the market's whims, the left and society at large should seize them for collective benefit. In one passage, they note that blockchain has the potential to create a more equitable and democratic society if steered correctly. This could mean using blockchain to facilitate things like universal basic income distribution via smart contracts or cooperative ownership schemes where communities manage resources through transparent ledgers. These ideas align with a hopeful answer to our question. Maybe blockchain can be a tool of autonomy, not new chains, if we intentionally design and govern it that way. However, the other side of that coin is clear. If we don't consciously shape these systems, they could easily fall into the same patterns of capitalism we know too well. Monopoly, inequality, exploitation, just in decentralized clothing. We've already observed speculative frenzies where a small group of insiders got fabulously rich, while latecomers lost money in a crash. We've seen the rise of giant crypto exchanges, somewhat centralized entities, like Binance or Coinbase, which many people rely on as intermediaries, effectively re-centralizing parts of the crypto experience. And whenever a new technology emerges, existing power structures try either to co-opt it or regulate it in ways that preserve their advantage. For example, governments have begun exploring central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, which use some blockchain tech, but could actually increase state control over money if implemented without privacy safeguards. It's a reminder that technology itself doesn't guarantee a particular outcome. It's how we implement and adapt it that matters. Nick Cernicek, along with others, might urge us to remain critical, but constructive. It's not about throwing the baby out with the bathwater, but rather asking tough questions. How do we ensure blockchain tools are inclusive, not just accessible to those with technical know-how or capital? How do we prevent early network effects from locking in a new boss same as the old boss? Is there a way to design protocols that favor distribution of power, for instance, reward small contributors, enforce limits against excessive control, or enable greater privacy so users aren't perpetually tracked? These are open problems, but they're being worked on. The mere awareness of them is a positive sign that the community can course correct. After all, the ethos behind this technology is empowerment, so if evidence shows a feature is disempowering in practice, there's pressure to fix it. Let's consider a concrete example of empowerment versus new hierarchy. The case of decentralized finance. DeFi platforms on Ethereum allow people to lend, borrow, and trade without traditional banks. In principle, this is amazing. A farmer in Kenya or a student in Argentina with just a smartphone can access financial services that their local banks might never offer. That's genuine empowerment. But DeFi also introduced complexity and risk, smart contract hacks, wild swings in collateral values, that ended up benefiting savvy insiders at the expense of average users at times. In 2020 to 2021, there were instances where protocols were so complicated that only professional traders could navigate them profitably, while newbies might lose money by not understanding hidden rules. Here we see a knowledge hierarchy. The code is public, transparent, but effectively opaque to those without advanced skills, which creates an opening for the experts to dominate. This isn't a reason to abandon DeFi. It's a reason to make it more robust and user-friendly, to educate users, and build safer smart contracts. It shows again that autonomy has to be cultivated. It won't automatically bloom just because the platform is decentralized. All these critiques and observations circle back to a central insight. Technology alone doesn't set us free. Our values, governance, and intentions do. Blockchain technology gave us new potential chains to shackle ourselves with, if we're not careful. But it also handed us tools to break free of chains that had bound us for ages, if we wield them wisely. So, where does that leave us? We've heard the lofty promises and seen the grounded critiques. Is the blockchain era one of true autonomy? Or just new chains? Perhaps it's time to conclude our exploration by synthesizing what we've learned and returning to Nietzsche's perspective one last time. Conclusion: autonomy or new chains, forging our digital destiny. As we stand at the intersection of philosophy and technology, one thing becomes clear. Empowerment is not a one-time gift. It's an ongoing struggle. Nietzsche's will to power reminds us that life and society are dynamic. Freedom must be continually created and reclaimed, not simply given. In the blockchain era, we've seen how this plays out. On one hand, we have more tools than ever to assert individual and community autonomy. Cryptocurrencies that bypass corrupt institutions, platforms owned and governed by users, data that we can choose to keep in our own hands. This is the bright promise. The vision of autonomy, where each of us has a voice and power, is truly distributed. It is, in a sense, a chance to reboot some of our fundamental systems with fairness and human empowerment in mind. On the other hand, human nature and power dynamics don't vanish just because we change the technology. New chains can form, sometimes literally in the code, sometimes in our behaviors. Hierarchies can re-emerge. The technically savvy over the newcomer, the wealthy early adopter over the late entrant, the loudest voice in the forum over the silent majority. Decentralized technology doesn't automatically guarantee decentralized outcomes. We've learned that lesson in this first decade of blockchain experiments. Scams, monopolies, and inequalities have appeared in this space too, teaching us humility. Perhaps, as some critics suggest, we weren't as prepared as we thought to wield this freedom. Or maybe the technology itself is still maturing to truly serve everyone. So, are we truly empowered or trapped by new digital hierarchies? The answer is not binary. We are empowered in new ways, and simultaneously at risk of new kinds of entrapment. Nietzsche might say, this is precisely the type of challenge that tests our will to power. It urges us to not become complacent, to not assume the battle for freedom is won just because we built a fancy decentralized app. Instead, we must be ever vigilant, ever creative, constantly re-evaluating values and structures. The will to power in this context could be interpreted as the drive to keep pushing technology toward truly liberating ends, to actively resist the slide into new dominations. Michel Foucault would nod in agreement that power is always in flux, and only by being aware of its workings can we hope to guide it. Vitalik Buterin and many in the blockchain community are indeed engaged in that very process now, tweaking protocols to make them fairer, exploring layer 2 solutions to make transactions cheaper, so cost doesn't become a barrier of entry, a new chain, and fostering open-source collaboration so that knowledge is shared, not hoarded. There is also a broader lesson transcending blockchain. No technology can substitute for human values and governance. We can design systems with decentralization, but justice, inclusion, and empowerment require human commitment. They require what Cernicek and Williams call a future-oriented politics, a willingness to shape these tools for the good of all. In an optimistic light, blockchain is a canvas on which we can paint a new social contract. If we choose to paint with care, there are projects emerging that aim to use blockchain for social good, securing land titles for the poor, ensuring fair pay in supply chains, enabling community currencies that help local economies. These show that the technology can be steered toward genuine empowerment, but they need support, understanding, and sometimes a critical eye to keep them on track. As we conclude, let's return to the title of this exploration: Nietzsche's Will to Power in the Blockchain Era. Autonomy or new chains? The very phrasing suggests a fork in the road. Which path will we take? Nietzsche taught the importance of choosing one's own path and embracing the responsibility that comes with freedom. The blockchain era hands us a remarkable toolkit to reimagine our economic and social relations. It's as if we've been given clay and fire to forge new shapes. We can craft tools that liberate, or we can inadvertently mold new manacles. The final thought I leave you with is one of empowered caution. We are not just passengers on this ride. We are co-creators. If we want autonomy, we must will it so. Through design, through community norms, through continuous critical inquiry, we must recognize the chains when they start to form and break them before they bind too tightly. In doing so, we carry forward the true spirit of Nietzsche's philosophy, not the law of the jungle, but the courage to continually overcome and reinvent. The blockchain era is young, and its story is still being written by us all. With reflection and resolve, we can strive to ensure that this grand experiment in decentralization lives up to its promise. A world where power truly belongs to everyone, and the only chains we carry are the ones we choose, or better yet, the ones we have broken.